Paul, you'll be promoted to a panelist shortly.
No.
Okay.
Hello?
You're all set. Go ahead. Go ahead.
There you go.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, board, for listening to me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I have concerns over the school safety regarding school ventilation and disinfection. And because of that, I did not believe that the time was right or the district ready for in-person school for all students. The scientific community have been actively discussing and evaluating whether the new coronavirus may also spread through aerosol indoor settings with poor ventilation. The age of some of the school buildings caused me to question whether they have EPA-approved healthy indoor air quality and ventilation. My specific questions are: one, are there windows in rooms that the students and staff will occupy that open? If not, what is the solution to the classes getting fresh air? Two, has the district ensured that there is acceptable indoor air quality for the occupancy plan for each space? Three, has the district done this by securing a professional review of overall configuration HVAC systems? Four, were there recommendations that HVAC systems need to be modified, and if so, was that taken care of, and if so, in what way? And five, has the district secured a professional maintenance service to manage the HVAC systems, such as is advised by Environmental Protection Agency? My second concern was regarding disinfecting facility and classrooms. One, I'd like to know, has the district hired professional janitors for cleaning, disinfecting, and maintaining records of applications? Two, was the chemical that was approved for disinfecting the rooms checked for warnings about allergens and strong chemicals which can affect sensitive skin and cause asthma? And three, can the chemicals be used on areas where food is prepared and eaten? And four, will the children and our staff be required to clean as well? If so, with what approved chemicals? That is all I have to say at the moment. I had other issues regarding the kids going back to school, but it seems like that's not happening right now. So I thank you very much for it.
Thank you for your comments. We appreciate it. We'll take those on board. Next speaker.
Stacy Sanders, you'll be joining the panel and you're set to go.
Good evening. Can everybody hear me? Okay, yes. Perfect. Good evening, Board of Education, Dr. Vitale, district staff, and community members in attendance. I thank you for this opportunity to share my comments with you this evening. After my husband and I had the opportunity to view Dr. Vitale's recent video outlining the PPE standards in conjunction with previously presented plans for grades TKs 5 to return to school, my son Michael, a second grader at Nichols, also asked to watch the video. This prompted a pretty lengthy and thorough discussion regarding all of the things a 7-year-old could possibly ask. Mask, how he doesn't like mask, but he knows that they help slow down germs. What happens if someone gets sick? What happens if he gets sick? How will he be able to high-five his friends? What about going to the library to check out books or going on field trips? Can he still help Miss Diana, our wonderful custodian, clean up? What if we can't have Leader in Me clubs? And how will school still be fun? As well as his feelings surrounding the various options presented prior to this evening, which were a return to hybrid at Nichols or staying fully virtual, meaning an unfortunate but possible move to Surfside or elsewhere depending on what happens. After our discussion and some additional back and forth and a lot of I don't knows from my end, my suggestion to Mikey was to do what I would do in his situation. Communicate those feelings with the people in the positions to do something about it. He did just that via a handwritten letter, which I have his permission to share. Dear School Board, my name is Mikey Sanders, and I am in second grade at Nichols Elementary. I know you are trying to figure out when we can go to school. I do not like COVID-19. I would be sad if one of my friends or teachers got sick. There is still too much COVID-19, and even though I miss real-life school, I think we should stay in virtual school. My teacher, Ms. Dubois, makes virtual school fun. We do breakout rooms, which is kind of like recess. If we go back to real life school, we will not be able to play at recess. My mom also says that we will also not be able to check out books from Miss Lisa at the library. I do not think it is safe to go to real life school, but I would be sad to leave Nichols and leave my friends. Thank you for reading my letter. Sincerely, Mikey Sanders. With that, thank you again for the opportunity to share my comments and my son's words. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Sanders and Mickey. Appreciate it. And Mikey, next speaker will be.
Our next three speakers will be Charles Finn, Paula Orba, and Tiffany Cooper Ortega.
All right.
Mr. Finn, you've been promoted to panels. Go ahead.
Good evening, everybody. President Blessing, members of the board, Superintendent Vitale, and district leadership team. As you know, I've been a teacher in Oceanside for over 30 years, and I currently teach 5th grade at South Oceanside Elementary School. Yesterday, one of my students told me that he was having to leave class early in order to go to the hospital to see his grandmother. His mother came online to clarify that grandmother had been hospitalized with COVID-19 for 3 months, and the hospital had contacted them that morning to say the family could come and see her for the first time. I was afraid to ask if it was also going to be the last time. I currently have 2 other students who are out of town in order to be with family due to COVID-19 deaths. This is very hard to deal with. I don't know about you, but I'm tired. I'm tired of comments from underinformed people who try to insist that this pandemic isn't real, that it doesn't affect children. I'm tired of those who argue that there's an acceptable number of deaths as the price we must pay for reopening our schools. My students have been and continue to be affected by COVID-19. As their teacher, I worry about their academic skills, but more than that, I have the responsibility to make sure that they learn in a safe and healthy environment. As an experienced teacher, I have what I need to meet their academic needs, but I depend on you, the Board of Education and district leadership, to support us in meeting our urgent health and safety needs. At my site, I have seen and participated in the efforts to prepare our students for a safe return to campus. We've done a lot, but we are still not ready. Plexiglass safety screens that have been placed in my classroom have been removed in order to put them in the special education rooms that were scheduled to reopen a week ago, but had nothing in place. This proposed delay to reopening elementary schools that was shared this evening is absolutely necessary in order to get our agreed upon safety protocols in place in every classroom, in every school, not to mention properly training our staff in many new protocols and procedures. I urge you to support this necessary delay in order to keep our students and our community safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Next. That's Paula.
So Orba, you've been promoted. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Paula Orba. I teach 4th grade at Santa Margarita. I speak tonight in support of remaining on virtual learning until an effective vaccine is readily available and/or our local infection rates drop significantly and into a flattening pattern. We are in the middle of a pandemic. A pandemic, by definition, is a hugely disruptive global event. Far from a return to normalcy, most studies predict a much worse second wave to hit this fall or winter. While none of us want to be away from in-person instruction longer than necessary, the science illustrates that we are not ready for a safe return. It is vital that all involved stay safe from this virus. We all have family members and loved ones with varying levels of vulnerability to real harm, even death. Additionally, scientists are only beginning to understand long-term health effects of COVID-19. Beyond the physical health concerns, I ask you to consider the negative effects of potentially yo-yoing between virtual learning and hybrid instruction. We as teachers and students, much like in a typical school year, are finding a rhythm in routines 6 weeks in. To switch to a hybrid model only to most likely need to switch back to virtual learning if and when infections occur at schools would be a further disruption to learning. Despite the many challenges of virtual learning, I do see our students coalescing into a positive learning community. That said, I do understand the real issues of childcare and the need for socialization, but let's face it, in-person instruction with masks, physical distancing, no playing together on the playground, and no sitting together at lunch is hardly an enriching social experience. The district has put forth phased-in opportunities for student supports and enrichments, as well as clubs and sports. It is in these areas, childcare during the school day, academic supports, and enriching social opportunities, that I believe Oceanside Unified should continue to focus its energy and resources until such time as it is safe to return to in-person instruction. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next was Tiffany. Was it?
It is.
Great,
Good
go ahead.
Good evening. I'm Tiffany Ortega, the supervising teacher of the Surfside K-5 Independent Study. As I listened to the board presentation, I did so wearing multiple hats. I listened as a teacher whose enrollment has increased by nearly 500%. I listened as ODA leadership who has participated in some of the groups that provided input affecting tonight's proposal for a safe return. I also listened as a parent of 2 OUSD students, anxiously awaiting their return to school. It makes me reflect on the process for a safe return for students. I'd like to share the collaboration between stakeholders and my appreciation of doing what is right for the safety of the OUSD community. As the bargaining chair for ODA, my team worked closely with OUSD leadership to bargain details of an MOU to keep our teachers and students safe during this pandemic. None of the subjects we talked about were easy. The conversations were difficult. The weight of the decisions we were making was heavy, but the collaboration was robust, and it led to an agreement that maintained safety for our school community above what might have been perceived as popular. We did what was right. In the elementary work group, we discussed not only logistics of a safe return for students, but also a schedule that would allow for the lowest risk of infection for all stakeholders. The discourse was pointed, heated, and uncomfortable, while the group struggled with the sobering realization that the decisions we made could affect the lives of colleagues, students, and their families. Not one member of that group shied away from sharing their opinion and concern regarding a return that might be too quick and failed to provide for the safety of our students. We all listened for understanding and continued to flesh out every scenario and option that would meet the needs of the community, would be best for students, and keep us all in the classroom and at school sites safe. Our work group recommended what was right. As I've said, these professional conversations were hardly convenient. They weren't taken lightly, but they are so appreciated by me personally, and let me explain why. The youngest 2 of my 4 children are still at El Camino, a junior and a senior. I want them to return to school. Their teachers want to return to school. They want to return to school. However, due to the nature of the beast with high school, there is not a safe way to maintain a low-risk cohort. The number of students with whom they would interact, even with a modified hybrid schedule, would not provide them a low-risk environment. It wouldn't be right. So I appreciate all of my OUSD family who have participated in these difficult conversations, those who have had the courage to push for the safety of the OUSD community, to all of those who have worked behind the scenes, for whom sleep evades while pondering our safe return, and to the school board who feels the weight of this decision. Know that doing what is right is far more important than doing what is easy. Please do what is right. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And do we have our next group of speakers?
Our next 3 will be Lynn Gonzalez, Todd Madison, and Jen Skellett.
Then you're all set. Go ahead.
Thank you and good evening. On a Friday in April last spring, I was holding a Zoom meeting with my 3rd graders, and a little boy told our class that his daddy was sick and using a machine to help him breathe. His dad died of COVID 3 days later. This was a man who became a Marine at age 17, was assigned to Camp Pendleton. After serving in both Iraq and Afghanistan, he retired from the Marine Corps and made Oceanside his home. He started a local business, married, and had a son. On April 10th, he had a headache, tested positive for COVID 2 days later, died at Tri-City on a ventilator 8 days after that. He was just 43 years old. This pandemic has uprooted all our lives. We want to be back in school. We want the economy to prosper. We want to be able to mix together socially, enjoy our favorite activities, not worry about wearing a mask or social distancing. We want COVID-19 to go away, but we must deal with reality. Our country is roughly 4% of the world's population, and yet we've got 25% of the world's cases and 20% of the death toll. In Oceanside, cases are rising, and while San Diego as a whole has maintained itself at Tier 2, Oceanside qualifies as Tier 1 widespread. I am one of 180 OUSD staff members who organized into 23 work groups last spring to begin planning for the education of Oceanside's children in the midst of a pandemic. We used health and safety guidelines, looked at various models, discussed the particulars, needs, and circumstances of Oceanside's community, and made our recommendations. But the work had just begun. For the implementation of protocols and procedures is quite complex. As every piece of the plan is envisioned and scrutinized, multiple questions arise, which lead to more questions still. There are the big questions: maintaining social distancing, creating procedures for daily health screening, supplying and wearing masks, proper ventilation, et cetera, et cetera. Then there is the myriad of details that must also be addressed. How are materials distributed? How do children enter and exit the schools? What happens when a child needs to go to the bathroom? What happens when a teacher fails the health screening? How does a teacher teach when she can't get near her students? What is the procedures and protocols for hand washing, drinking water, break time, and using classroom libraries? The list goes on and on and on. So I commend OUSD's leadership for recognizing that more time is needed to analyze our plans, troubleshoot and correct its weak spots, ensure all equipment, procedures, and protocols are in place, ensure all staff is properly trained, and to communicate all of these things clearly to our families. What the future holds is unknown and tensions are high, but we must look to the science, be gentle with one another, stick together as a community, and err on the side of safety. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker.
Mr. Madison, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Todd Madison, parent of Oceanside kids, and a disclosure to all a candidate for school board in the November election. I appreciate all the effort our teachers and school staff have put into dealing with the COVID crisis. It's certainly difficult for all. I also appreciate all the effort district staff has put into the various outlines we've seen. But I need to point out they're all lacking one thing, what the majority of parents chose last spring: a plan for a return to full-time instruction in a way that's safe for our kids and our teachers. Note that the recent survey simply left this question off. The best way to avoid getting data you don't want to hear is simply not ask the question, apparently. We've now seen plans for partial returns for both K-5 and secondary. Both are incredibly complex. No one would describe either as ideal, and neither are plans for a full-time return. Meanwhile, we've seen other districts in the county launch their full-time returns. Del Mar Elementary started full-time school on September 8th. They also have a distance learning option. Somehow they've managed to provide what their parents want. In addition to the feedback we've gotten in the surveys and public comment here, I've also knocked on over 800 doors now, and I can tell you parents and teachers overwhelmingly want their kids back in school, as long as it can be done safely for kids and teachers. Last week, I actually stood on the doorstep of a Del Mar teacher. They told me no problem so far as well. Del Mar is proving a full-time safe return is possible. This morning, their COVID dashboard showed 5 active cases. With over 3,000 students and employees, that's a rate of 0.16%. 0 of those cases have been in employees. Even if our case rate were double theirs, that would only be 0.32%. It's not to say that COVID is not serious or real, or that we should not take all possible precautions. It's just data, not anecdotal stories, that shows if done properly, we can open up in a way that's safe for kids and teachers. Yes, I've heard Del Mar is a smaller district, which is meaningless because the entire district does not congregate en masse. Kids attend specific schools. The average school in Del Mar has 516 kids. The average elementary in OUSD has 518. For K-5, is 2 extra kids per school an insurmountable hurdle? What's the difference between Del Mar's Sage Canyon Elementary, enrollment 624, and OUSD's Reynolds, enrollment 627? Financially, we see OUSD is getting $18 million in COVID mitigation funds. That's $1,100 per student. Is Del Mar somehow receiving more, or is it just spending its money differently on what its parents want, perhaps? Certainly, secondary schools are more of a challenge. We saw that in the plans tonight. But my point is, if it can be done safely for K-5, something OUSD doesn't want to do, there could be ways to do that for secondary as well. But we haven't seen that. Perhaps we need our district to pay more attention to what parents want for their kids, as well as our board. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Jennifer Skillett, go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening. Full disclosure, I am the president of Oceanside Teachers Association, and we fully endorse Mike Blessing for our future board member. Thank you. Nothing is more satisfying than a classroom filled with your students when they have that aha moment. It's magical. It's like unicorns and glitter. This year, 2020, hasn't been kind to us. Professionally, we've been pushed to work harder, learn more so we can service our students' academic, social, and emotional needs, all while on a virtual platform. Last spring, OUSD made that transition to distance learning in less than 2 weeks. I'm proud of that work, proud of our practitioners for rolling up their sleeves, and now 31 days into our new school year, the social connections, the procedures, learning is happening. Is it the same? Is it normal? No, but it's still magical. Teachers and students are establishing different connections. I might argue deeper connections. Learning is happening across the city of Oceanside. I'm proud of our work our practitioners have accomplished, and we are getting better. We need to applaud our staff and students for making virtual learning work. It's not easy and it's bumpy, but we got this. I want to thank the OUSD administration for putting together a thorough and bold presentation. As a leader of the teachers union, our main concern has been the safety of our students, our staff, and their families. On September 16th, ODA leadership surveyed our membership. 75% of our teachers, speech language pathologists, our psychologists, our TOSAs, and our school nurses do not feel that we have a low risk work environment, and they did not feel safe. Two things correlate with ODA's recent membership survey and tonight's presentation by administration. One, Oceanside's infection rates are concerning. Oceanside has the 5th highest infection rate in the county. Article 16 in our collective bargaining agreement states, employees will not knowingly be required to work under unsafe conditions. We need the infection rates to go down in Oceanside. In our safety survey, the majority of our employees felt coming back was unsafe. They felt unequipped, untrained, and uninformed about the safety protocols at their school sites. This is not the time for the typical, let's just do this, build the plane while we're flying education mentality. We want the reopening of Oceanside Unified Classrooms to be successful. We want students and employees to be safe. In order to do that, we need the time to tighten down our school site safety logistics. We need to be consistent with our district-wide safety procedures. We need this time because our practitioners are teaching virtually. They are assessing, they are building connections with our students. Tonight, a bold decision is being placed in your lap. Let's give the gift of time and let's do this right. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Next group of speakers, Ann.
Next speaker is Patricia Ramirez.
Thank you. Good evening, President Blessing, board members, Dr. Vitale, teachers, parents, and staff. My name is Patricia Ramirez, and I am a parent of 2 elementary students at, oops, I knew that was going to happen. I lost my screen. There we go. At McAuliffe Elementary School. I also happen to be a 2nd grade teacher at McAuliffe. As a teacher mom, I am exponentially invested in what's happening with our district right now. Not only do I need to advocate for the safety of my own children, but I also need to advocate for the safety of my students and their families. Oh, and I also need to advocate for myself and my colleagues. I'd like to thank you for continuing to put science and safety at the forefront of your decision-making process. I understand the inconvenience of virtual learning as I'm experiencing it from both sides of the coin as a teacher and a parent. I also understand that none of us asked to be in a pandemic situation, yet here we are. What's important now is that decisions are made responsibly, thoughtfully, and equitably to ensure the safety of all of our stakeholders. We cannot afford to make mistakes during this process. Please, please keep this in mind as you make decisions that will affect our entire community. Thank you.
Next speaker, Joe Brinkman.
Brinkman, if you unmute, you'll be ready to go.
Speaking. I'm unmuted. Got it.
Perfect.
Can you hear me? Loud and clear, I hope. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Okay. Good evening, Superintendent Vitale, Executive Cabinet, and board members. My name is Joe Brinkman. I'm a teacher from Oceanside High School. Let me first say a huge thank you to all of my colleagues tirelessly working to deliver the best models that we had to work with. People, read my lips, if you could see me. Read my lips. This is a hard job. And it is not for the faint of heart. It is not for people that do not have the experience, the credentials, the know-how, the person-to-person interaction with our students. We are awesome. We have come together in the worst pandemic that we've ever seen, ever. And it's unprecedented. It's going to go down in history. Those people that do not have the information, it's easy for them to point the finger. Some of the people that I read the numbers to, I talked to students today, in fact, about the numbers of people that are dying. As of September 29th, today, 1 million people have died from COVID. I would also like to point out that there are, in the United States alone, there are 7,044,327 confirmed cases now. For some that speak unknowingly, I just want to say, are these numbers not high enough for you? That you now keep saying, we want our students to get back in the classroom, and we do. We, the teachers, the parents, the students themselves, the cabinet. I don't know anyone that wants this. Nobody wants this pandemic. So excuse me, but when I listen to people who have no experience in the classroom talking like they do, I work in a 1906 building. My teachers know that we're scared to death of the HVAC system, that we don't know that we're breathing air that is going to make us sick. You've heard my colleagues talk about the people that they have known, the students they have, that their parents have died from this disease. What more will it take? Okay, here I repeat these facts because I think, do I have to keep doing that and reviewing? Are we not adults? I understand the students, they're children still. We have to guide them through this. But please, we have grown adults that refuse to wear a mask at all times in buildings with your colleagues. Stop breathing on them, put on a mask. We have to social distance. We are not going to be able to monitor the distancing at my school because we have 2,100 students. We can't have them all together. They they share food, they share drinks, they share their PDA. We don't have enough staff to truthfully, safely monitor all of our students. One thing I've learned throughout my life is that when people do not have information, they make stuff up. Trust the experts, trust your district, trust your board. We know what we're talking about. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Next speaker.
I'm going to call 3 this time.
Okay, great.
Laura Eventer, Desiree Mellor, and Kate Vinson.
Laura Evanger, you're all set. Go ahead.
Can you guys hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. I want to say thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. I have a list of things that I wanted to go over with you this evening, but not to be redundant because many of my colleagues and the work groups have already gone over some of these stats for you, so I'll keep my comments short this evening. I wanted to start by saying that I read an article the other day from the superintendent of Carlsbad, and he stated that our teachers and students are hitting their stride right now in terms of distance learning. Carlsbad has made the decision to keep their middle and high schools on distance learning until January. I have to say that I agree with him. We recently did our 6-week grades, and my grades are higher than they've ever been right now. I have more assignments coming in now than I've ever had. And I think that that's because the kids are enjoying this. I think this transition has been harder for adults than it has for the kids. I was also concerned with instructional minutes and what the hybrid model would do. I went from teaching 4 to 5 lessons a week to 3. Hybrid would bring me down to 1. I also thought it was important to mention that the hybrid model looks different on every campus. I'm at King Middle School. We have an excess of 1,300 kids. Half of our students is over 600. My best friend is at Chavez. They have just over 600 kids. Their hybrid day is around 300 kids. That is vastly different when you consider the amount of students and the amount of teachers it takes. I won't go over the airflow or ventilation system. We all know that that needs to be at a certain level for everyone to return. But what I thought was important to mention was that we are coming up on cold and flu season, which also includes allergies for many of us. And every morning, a parent has to wake up and decide whether or not to send their child to school, hybrid model or not. I think our absences would be astronomical because so many of the symptoms of COVID are the same of allergies, are the same of the flu, and are the same of cold. And then I think that the last point that I would like to make tonight, and I know that it is something that is very obvious to most of you, is that there is a reason that we are having this meeting via Zoom. And I think it's the same reason that we have our kids at home right now. We want everyone to be safe. And I feel like if it was the right time to open our schools, we'd all be in the boardroom together wearing PPE. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you, Laura.
Desiree Millier, you're up next. Go ahead.
Thank you. First, I would like to just thank the board and Dr. Vitale for always having such evidence-based practices. I'm a biochemist down at UCSD, so I will be honest, when I scrutinize some of the things you're doing, I am so proud of the evidence that you are using to make some of these policies. But you've done some great jobs recommending policies for when we can safely return, but I haven't seen a lot on your policies for while we are back at school. I think that no matter how low the rates get, I would have liked to seen something on what you're going to do once we get back, because no matter how low the rates get, a positive exposure is inevitable. And we have to take that into consideration, whether it be from a student, a staff, a family member, a child's family member, just like someone mentioned, they had to get off to go visit someone at the hospital. And we have lots of really good data and recommendations from the CDC on how to handle these the symptomatic and these clinical cases. But the current stats put pediatric cases at 16 to 45% asymptomatic and subclinical cases. That's 1 in 6 to 1 in 2 kids will never have symptoms. So if you have a child that has a positive exposure, we know somebody has been exposed to a confirmed positive. How are you going to make sure that that child is not coming back to campus as an asymptomatic case when we know 1 in 6 or 1 in 2 will never develop symptoms? So what are you going to do? Like, are you going to have kids require a negative test? How can you guarantee that you don't have kids coming back? And as for that, how do you know who's going to be exposed? For 1 through 8, our school on base is K through 8. First graders through 8th graders share a bathroom. We know that viral loads are shedded in fecal matter for days before symptoms arrive. So your asymptomatic and pre-symptomatic transmission can occur in a bathroom, and you've got grades 1 through 8 sharing bathrooms. How are you going to monitor that? And lastly, I will say that also as a parent of a 3rd grader who missed half of 1st grade and all of 2nd grade because he was in the hospital getting chemotherapy and a bone marrow transplant, I do have to point out that a lot of safety is just compliance and sucking it up. I have seen a lot of parents say that masks are too hard for their kids. Well, let me tell you, when my 7-year-old was sitting in a hospital bed celebrating his 8th birthday, hooked up to a chemotherapy machine, he wore a mask with a smile. And I have to give a shout out to Miss Tiffany Ortega because she was the light of our lives the past year, and she did a great job teaching us virtually. But safety is possible when people understand that it's not an option. So our kids could go back to school safely, but parents just have to do what's necessary. And I appreciate the board using evidence, and I hope that they'll continue to just hold parents accountable.
Thank you so much.
Kate Benson, you're all set. Go ahead.
Good evening. I didn't write down what I want to say. It mostly is I am not scared for myself. I've been teaching in this school district for 24 years. I'm a 3rd grade teacher at South Oceanside Elementary, and going back is scary. I'm not concerned for myself. I'm concerned for students and staff who may be asymptomatic and go home and pass COVID on to their families. Many students in our school district live with their grandparents. Their grandparents live in their house. I just think it would be a tragedy to have an asymptomatic student go home and give it to their grandparent and have folks die. And that's pretty much what I want to say. I would urge us not to go back until January, just because we are not ready. We're just not ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate.
Next three speakers, Kelly Speck, Joanna Durantes, and Tina De La Rosa.
Kelly Speck, you're all set. Go ahead.
Thank you. Current guidance from the CDC, California Department of Public Health, and our local health officials instruct us to practice safe social distancing methods, such as wearing a mask, maintaining 6 feet of distance from non-household members, and avoiding congregating indoors. This morning, the principal of Palmquist Elementary and the superintendent published a video to students on Class Dojo of the two of them indoors within what appears to be less than 6 feet of each other and not wearing masks. How can we trust that our students and teachers will be kept safe in a hybrid learning environment when OUSD administration is setting an example of non-conformance with California Department of Public Health best practices? Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Joanna.
Joanna Durantes, you're all set. Go ahead.
Hello. Good evening. My name is Joanna, and I am a parent of a 6th grader at Chavez and an instructional aide in one of the Mock Severe classes that are now expected to reopen October 19th. I'm a little relieved the start date for special education is being extended because I do not believe the district is prepared for a reopening date of October 5th. As of today, we still do not have plexiglass in our classroom. How are we supposed to prepare for our classroom for when our students return when we don't even have all of our PPE? One of my other concerns is about protocols. If a behavior occurs, or how will we be handling toileting and how to safely keep a distance in any of these instances? I hope with this extended time, district administration can better communicate information to staff and that we receive the proper PPE and proper training in order to keep our students and staff safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna. Next is Tina.
Hi.
Hi.
Good evening, President Blessing, members of the board, Superintendent Vitale, district leadership team, and community members. My name is Tina De La Rosa, and I was born and raised in Oceanside, and I am proud to say this will be my forever city. I've been a teacher in this district for 31 years. It gives me great hope to see that conscientious collaboration and care that has been taken when considering the safety of our students, staff, and community. I so appreciate that the district is admitting we are not yet ready to open for full hybrid instruction at the elementary level. Kudos for postponing the date for hybrid instruction. Thank you for listening to our safety concerns. Thank you for understanding that the most important issues are all linked to one thing. That one thing is staying alive. I must admit, this world pandemic has humbled me. It has frightened me. It has reduced my focus to my family and friends more than ever before. This world is in the midst of a crisis. It has reminded me of what is important. I feel great compassion for us all. It means we are all suffering together. Every human being has been touched by this global catastrophe. Everyday life can sometimes give us amnesia to what it means to be a global citizen. As a global citizen, it means focusing on what you can control. So search your own soul daily and ask, have I given all I could today? As teachers, it is resounding yes. I have followed Don Miguel Ruiz's book, The Four Agreements. One of the agreements is do your best. So every day, our best can change. Kudos, OUSD, for embracing this global challenge and continuing in conversations. Most importantly, for really listening and doing your best. Teaching physical education is my dream job, and I consider it an honor to give back all the love I have received. But this is not just a teacher thing, it is a human thing. We are all giving our daily best. So I am going to remind everyone to have great compassion for all humans, not just the ones you agree with. I wholeheartedly support Mike Blessing for school board. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
I did.
Um,
I did.
Mr. Dahl's left the room.
Yes, I will.
We are at Rachel Miller.
we go.
Go ahead.
Hello.
Go for it, Rachel.
All right. Well, thank you very much for allowing me to speak today. I really appreciate, and my message has changed a little bit because you have extended the time before students are going back to school, and I appreciate that. And I appreciate you for allowing me to speak today. My name is Dr. Rachel Miller. I work in higher education at both the community college and the university level. My roles in higher education have allowed me to see the direct impact that COVID has had on students, faculty, and staff, and also to stay informed on a nearly daily basis with the information provided by the county health and college leadership. So as you guys have mentioned, for example, as of today, San Diego County has a total of 20 community outbreaks, and then our case rate is now 6.9. These are all things that were brought up and things that I'm glad to see push the reopening of the schools. Those outbreaks, and as our previous speakers have mentioned, the case rates are disturbing. It's a scary situation. I fear that when we return to school, these numbers will increase again. And just want to make note of that. And I'm so glad that you did decide to make a delay in the return to hybrid. More importantly, besides being in higher education, I'm a mother of an elementary school student in the Oceanside Unified School District who also is on an IEP. And the adjustment in the spring was very difficult for when we were, first brought out of school. There were a lot of tears, and then my son had problems too. So those were my tears. But really, I know that for him, change is one of the biggest challenges to his academic progress. It's not uncommon for children to have a problem with change. And I know that many of the teachers would agree when kids come back, for example, after the time change in the spring, that they seem to be different people. So even the hour time change is a major factor. My huge concern is about change and about bringing the kids back and yo-yoing them from virtual back to hybrid to virtual. And I do have a huge concern about that, especially with my son being on the IEP. I also have looked at the idea of Surfside, but see that again with him being on the IEP and with his issues with change, being an even more dramatic change than just being at his home school or at his school of choice. So my suggestions, and I hope you hear them, would be if students are returning to the hybrid learning, having even a clear return date after winter break. And we saw after summer, it was an easier transition. And then also having the potential for their home school, their school of choice, to give virtual learning.
Thank you so much.
Next three speakers, Rachel Miller, Joseph Cook, and Jennifer Johnson.
Well, we did just Rachel, so.
I'm sorry. Okay, so Joseph Cook, Jennifer Johnson, and Robert Holt.
Great.
Mr. Cook, you're set. Go ahead.
All right, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, we can.
All right, thank you, board members, parents, faculty, staff. Special thanks to everyone who took the time to present this evening. Very knowledgeable presentations. I enjoyed listening to everyone. My son is a third grader at Nichols Elementary, and he's also on an IEP. His disability makes him also sensitive to changes in schedule and requires him to have an in-class helper to ensure he has a solid continuation in his learning. One of the concerns I have is if we go back to this hybrid model of in-person learning where the kids are only in class for 8 hours a week, my son might not have access to that helper who's going to help him continue to meet his milestones and goals in his education. There really hasn't been an explanation yet. We don't know how that's going to work out. My son and many of his classmates are finally settling into this virtual learning. It's weird and it's unusual, but they seem to be picking it up and adapting just fine, as we all know kids can do. They're very adaptable. Whatever you tell them is going to be normal, they'll figure it out and they'll make it normal. But they also require consistency from the adults that are in charge of making sure they have that safe learning environment. So, setting up a learning environment that's going to give them that continuity, it's an integral part of the educational process. Changing that midstream, mid-semester, that's going to be detrimental to many students, probably my son and many others. I find it hard to understand why it's so important to risk the health of our students, our teachers, our family, and our community members by returning to in-person school for 8 hours a week. It just doesn't seem worth it. We're in the middle of a global pandemic. Wouldn't it be better just to leave them in distant learning till the end of the semester and go back after Christmas break? As a parent, as a layperson, it makes sense to me. I'm not someone who deals with big data sets. I'm not, I'm not a doctor. I'm not someone who does that. I'm a construction worker. I can see the logic here of just keeping the kids in school for the semester and letting them come back after Christmas if it's safe. COVID is dangerous to our community. It's especially dangerous to those with pre-existing conditions. My son lives with family members that are high risk, his grandfather, his older brother, not to mention the risk of spread to our healthy, non-pre-existing condition family members. I can't imagine the grief and guilt he would feel if he thought he might be responsible if one of our family members got sick or, something or worse. I don't want him to have to live with that the rest of his life. I would much rather him have that freedom to just grow and learn and be a kid and go to school. And it's just weird. We all know school is a petri dish under normal conditions, and this is not normal conditions. I feel that allowing any form of in-person learning during the global pandemic is dangerous and irresponsible. Thank you for the time to speak with you this evening.
Thank you so much for those comments. Next.
Jennifer Johnson, you're all set. Go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hello, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. My name is Jennifer Johnson, and I've been a teacher in OUSD since 1999. As we see schools opening across the nation, we recognize that we all share the important goal of getting students back into a classroom. However, with this shared goal is the unique considerations of each community. It was 1 week ago that San Diego County watched with trepidation as it maintained its red substantial tier status by the very narrowest of margins. Today, we learned that San Diego County will remain in the red tier again by a narrow margin. With San Diego County barely maintaining this red tier status, I must ask, how comfortable would you feel knowing that your doctor passed their medical exams? Barely. How at ease would you feel learning the plane you just boarded passed safety inspections? Barely. When it comes to safety, the word barely is barely comforting. And unfortunately, within each of these bare margins, we must also consider the sobering reality that Oceanside has some of the higher number of cases within the county of San Diego. With this, I support the district's recommendation to reconsider previously proposed opening dates. I encourage the delay in school reopening until we have a consistent and much lower number of cases within both our county and our city. Based on the state's tiered system, Oceanside Unified School District has the right to reopen schools. However, with rights comes responsibility. It is our responsibility to ensure that we are welcoming students and staff into a safe environment. This delay is necessary not only due to COVID numbers, but also needed to allow our schools time to put safety equipment and protocols in place before welcoming students to a campus. At this time, there are endless unanswered questions about the logistics of reopening schools. As a teacher, I will be the direct face of safety for my students. Small safety questions can have big consequences, and this is not a situation where we can figure things out as we go. In the spring, we were faced with a sudden transition into distance learning. We are not in that situation now. We have time to make sure the certainties outweigh the uncertainties of reopening. Thankfully, a delay in opening does not equate a delay in learning, as we know students are engaged in virtual learning with teachers that are working longer and harder than ever on behalf of their students. As data changes daily, I urge OUSD to continue to evaluate the COVID-19 numbers that are unique to Oceanside and take ample time to ensure safety protocols are in place before reopening schools. For our teachers and our students, we strive for more than barely. For the determination and when to safely reopen schools, I ask the same. For the safety and peace of mind of our entire school community, please do not open schools when the time is barely right. Please provide us with the assurance of knowing that OUSD is opening our schools when the time is absolutely right. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Jennifer. Next speaker. Is this our last speaker as well?
Yes.
Robert. Okay.
Mr. Ho, you're all set. Go ahead. Robert Ho, if you unmute, you're free to address the board.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Hi, Mike.
Hi,
Good evening. My name is
Yes.
Robert, and I'm an Oceanside resident for the last 22 years. I'm a science teacher at King Middle School for, now 24 years now. And I'm also a parent of a fifth grader at Palm Quest Elementary. And Dr. Vitelli, Ethan was really happy to see you on TV today. And so he's able to see you without the mask on. Yeah. I want to thank you and for the work that you're doing for our community. And thank you for listening to our inputs and taking all of our criticisms gracefully. Okay. I am adapting to this virtual learning environment. My students are adapting as well, and there are some positive in the classroom. Just like Laura, my colleague said, I have something like 90% of my students are turning in all their assignments, and that's astounding. Okay. I started class about 5 minutes before the official start of the class, and I just like to sit back, and the kids are beginning to talk to each other. I have a couple of kids always talking about sports. I have kids staying after class talking to me about the trips that I've taken in the weekends, and it's fun. My wife, she is a third grade teacher, she's also adapting to the new environment. Okay, for someone that begrudgingly danced during our wedding, I have observed her dancing with her student over Zoom. Okay, but of all with all those positives, I miss teaching in the classroom. I miss the abundance of laughter in the classroom. I miss listening to the discussion in between the students. I miss seeing the anticipation, the excitement, and the smile on the students' faces as they actively engage in the experiment that I've designed. Okay, all those are really challenging to replicate in this virtual learning environment. I do want to return back to teaching in person. However, this is not the time to return back to school in person. The proposed hybrid schedule is not ideal, as it reduces the instructional minute that students will receive compared to the current virtual learning schedule. Although it is not ideal, the proposed schedule is necessary to increase the safety of our students for in-person instruction. Okay. Now, looking at 50% reduction of numbers of students in the classroom, doesn't matter what campus you're in, what we know about our kids' hygiene practice, we know it's not safe. Okay. So upon the return to the classroom, we will see an increase in the rate of transmission of COVID-19 in our community. Even if the student's individual risk of serious illness is lower than the general public, they will still transmit that virus to each other and their loved ones at home. Okay. Board trustees, as you consider a decision tonight, I urge you to delay the return in-person instruction for all students until we can do everything that is possible to ensure the safety of our staff, our students, and their family. Thank you.
Thank you. That was the last speaker to speak on this agenda item relating to the delay of the return to our classrooms.
President Blessing?
Yes.
Yeah, just want to acknowledge that there were 3 more submissions, but the people who left the room. They were here earlier. Alice Sproul, Vanessa McCarthy, and Kyle Dahl.
Okay. But they left the room before we could get them in. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. In there. We only have public comments left. So do we have, we'll move on to that. Ann or Greg, do we have, are they still with us? There were 4, I believe, at the outset.
I will call their names.
Thank you.
They will come in this order. Victoria Mariani, Susan Peachy, Todd Madison, and we'll end with Tiffany Ortega.
Okay. Victoria. Greg, is she with us? Can you find her?
Yes, he's getting.
And Ms. Moran, you are on live now. Go ahead.
Great.
Victoria, you're all set. You just have to unmute your phone. Cute.
Got a mechanical issue, a muting issue?
No, the caller left the line, so I'll try to pick her back up.
Let's go on to the next.
Go ahead and get Ms. Peachy up here just 1 second.
Hello, Victoria Briani is right here, and she was having a phone issue. Can she speak from this device, please? Thank you.
Sure, you go. Why don't you go ahead right now? Do you mind do that? And then we'll have her go next.
Okay, go ahead. Okay. Good evening, board and community members. My name is Susan Peachy, and I teach 3rd grade at Ivy Ranch. I am speaking tonight with the hope that board members are as committed as I am to wanting all students to have equal access to education. This is our job, and it is prescribed by law. Unfortunately, after months of virtual instruction, some Oceanside students still have not had access to an education since schools closed on March 13th. The outcome that I am hoping for after speaking tonight is for district leadership to be held accountable for ensuring not just that students have a device, but at the very least are taught how to log into the portal and access learning platforms on consistent, reliable internet. For students and families that have not used a device at home, this is essential. Having a device without knowledge of how to use it or having internet access makes it an expensive paperweight. In March, I was concerned when one of my students did not connect with our class once we went online. At that time, I accepted the answer of the district is working on a plan. There was no precedent for our global pandemic. In April, May, and June, I regularly expressed concerns to my assistant principal and principal. I have an ESL student with no access to instruction or classmates. My heart was heavy. It still is. In August, after communicating with the student's current teacher, I was dismayed to find that the student still has not connected with the class. A device was dropped off, but the student has no internet. I needed to go up the chain of command. I wrote a passionate email to the OUSD coordinator of English learners giving specifics. In part, quote, I don't understand how OUSD ELL students and or students living in poverty, who are already usually behind their peers, are allowed to go months without education. Discrimination disgusts me, so I must speak up, or I too am part of the problem. The response I received in August included, in part, everyone is working together to move as quickly as possible so that technology and access is provided to students. I will follow up to see where this family is within the process of connectivity. In 2 days, we begin October. I am speaking up now on behalf of this student and all students who have missed 1/3 of their previous grade and, as of today, 17% of the school year. When will all Oceanside students have access to an education? In closing, with all due respect, I ask board members to question, is the district following state and federal law? According to the Equal Education Opportunity 1974, Section 1703F, it will overcome language barriers that impede ELL programs. Distance learning is our educational program. I hope you as school board members will hold the OUSD leadership accountable for a plan of immediate action for ensuring all Oceanside students are receiving an education. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead and have your, was it Tiffany or no, Victoria? Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Sorry about that. I've never been on my phone before, and I guess I accidentally hung up.
You got 3 minutes.
Good evening, esteemed board members. Thank you. Good evening, esteemed board members, district staff, teachers, students, families, and community members. I'm Victoria Mariani, 20-year employee of the district and a 5th grade teacher at San Luis Rey Elementary School. Tonight, I'm speaking about the remodeling of the San Luis Rey Elementary School site. First, I want to emphatically thank the board for approving this long overdue project. I also want to thank Bell and the bond manager, Penny McGrew, for their work, and specifically Penny's belief that the proposed project will fall within the budget allotted to the project by OUSD. My concern is twofold. One, is there enough money in that budget to account for all of the obstacles hidden behind the walls of that antiquated school, including asbestos abatement, mold removal, and the expansion of the cafeteria/MPR to appropriately accommodate our school's visual and performing arts program? And two, can the project be completed in a timely manner? As an Oceanside resident, I hesitate to vote to pass another bond in these economically challenging times when this project, alongside Garrison's repeatedly promised remodel project, were delayed for years by prior OUSD leadership, and we haven't even broke ground on the SLR project. Yet, OUSD is now planning for a model at Jefferson. I worry that the dragging of feet on the SLR project may result in district leadership's misplacing OUSD's declining enrollment projections onto the backs of our already disenfranchised community. I'm here to humbly ask the board to oversee the SLR remodel through to fruition in an efficient and effective manner. I passionately implore the board to designate the money that is generated from the sale of the Garrison property to the SLR project if necessary. Another way for the district to save money and put more funds toward the SLR project is to scrap the hiring of a consulting firm to facilitate a school name change. Even after the 3 failed attempts of the previous naming committee, I'm still confident that the staff and community of San Luis Rey, with district guidance, can perform this task with minimal or no cost to the district. In closing, I leave you with these possibilities. Board member Dr. Stacy Begin had suggested John C. Lewis School for the Visual and Performing Arts, and Oceanside Teachers Union President Jennifer Skellett had recommended Ruth Bader Ginsburg School for the Visual and Performing Arts. Either way, go Sea Gators!
Thank you very much. Appreciate the enthusiasm. Next speaker.
I want to turn off the camera. I don't see. Okay, well, you don't have to see the camera.
Mute your camera.
You don't have to turn it on. Look. Stop video. Okay. See, stop.
There we go. You're on, Todd.
All right, thank you. So,
Thank you.
Hi, Todd Madison again. I'm sure everybody listening at this late hour knows I'm a candidate for school board this fall. As the board and district staff watching know, I've been involved in helping increase parent involvement in Oceanside for years. I was the first parent representative in the LCAP committee. Stacy and I also led the district parent advisory committee, in both cases working to increase involvement and give parents more a voice in our district. One of the biggest issues we have in our district is the continued drop in enrollment. Some of this is shifting demographics, but some is parents making other choices for their kids. It's not a sentiment I share. All three of ours have gotten an excellent education at Oceanside, but I can understand their feelings, especially when we combine that with the general sentiment we've heard. Why bother? Nothing ever changes. It's the number one reason parents have always given me when I ask why they don't get involved. And now we see that reflected in current enrollment numbers, where we see an astounding drop this year, 1,261 students, over 7%. Parents don't feel their kids are getting the education they want and are choosing alternatives. Parents have clearly said what they want, full-time in-person class, provided it can be done safely for kids and teachers. And the district has clearly ignored that, not even producing a realistic plan to do that so the board could consider it. If this enrollment drop holds, we're going to see $17 million less in revenue next year. Added to a projected deficit of $10.5 million already, that makes for $25 to $30 million in red ink, and that's in 1 year. We know what happens next if that happens. We lay off employees, we cut teachers, we cut services and programs for our kids. We've seen this movie before in the Great Recession. Our district has been in financial trouble for years and has been more than willing to cut from our kids to preserve pay increases for itself. We've seen that over and over again too. Last December, we saw the district projecting a $7 million deficit, but chose to add $5 million to that in extra bonus raises for district employees, including administrative staff who have a median total compensation of $158,000 a year. This board, including my opponent in this race, voted unanimously in favor of those extra bonus raises, just a few months after cutting bus service from the Latino kids in Crown Heights. We need to do something different to deal with this in the coming fiscal crisis. We need to put kids first in our decision-making process, not district first. That's going to require a change in our school board. Everyone listening who feels they can't count on the current board to put their kids' interests first is encouraged to go to my website, todd4kids.com. That's todd4kids.com. Find out more and support me, Todd Madison, in this election. Let's put kids first in Oceanside. Todd Madison for school board. I appreciate everybody's support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, Tiffany Ortega.
Good evening again. I am still Tiffany Ortega, the supervising teacher of Surfside K-5 Independent Study, but as previously explained, I'm also the mom of two El Camino Wildcats. Not only two Wildcats, but two members of El Camino's Golden Pride. And not only the mom of these Golden Pride members, but also I serve on the CGP Band Booster Board. Yes, I am that parent. I'm the parent that normally attends the Friday night marching band shows. You know, the ones where they play a little football just before and after the main events of the marching band. So as Ms. Frazier mentioned earlier, there are students that have been allowed to return in small groups to participate in group workouts, groups like football, volleyball, cheerleading, dance, tennis, cross country, etc. During these camps, I also understand that there are specific guidelines and protocols to be followed to ensure physical distancing, such as maintaining a distance of 6 feet, wearing facial coverings, and monitoring possible symptoms. As I stated in my previous speech, I appreciate OUSD leadership for doing what is right and allowing these groups to return with a small amount of measured risk. I'm asking for the same consideration for some small groups of ECGP, specifically Drumline and Color Guard. It's my understanding that their request to convene small group practice was denied, and I'm struggling with that decision. Let me be clear. I understand that the marching band practicing together is out of the question at this point due to the nature of the wind instruments and the higher risk of infection. Drumline and Color Guard do not fall into that category. Drumline is exactly as it sounds: percussion, banging on things loudly, forcefully, artistically. Did I mention loudly? It's done using their own equipment that is not shared. Believe me, you don't touch a drum or sticks. Can be done wearing facial coverings and easily 6 feet apart from one another, preferably more than 6 feet from parents with diminishing hearing. Color Guard is the artistic pageantry of choreographed routines using flags and other individual props. Color Guard members also use their own equipment, could wear facial coverings that would not affect their routine, and regarding physical distance, they must stay more than 6 feet away from one another in order to properly operate their equipment and walk away safely. Spoken as a parent who has had to safely navigate through a Color Guard practice in full swing. See what I did there? Full swing. So tonight I am asking Dr. Lawrence to reconsider his denial of ECGP's request for Color Guard and Drumline to begin small group practice as a small step back to normal for these kids. Please apply the same set of guidelines to these groups that are being applied to other groups at the high school. Finally, Mike Blessing is the clear and positive choice for OUSD School Board. Thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you. And that was our last speaker, I understand. Is that correct, Ann?
Yes.
All right.